Hello, welcome those of you who've joined this webinar early. Some of you, this is Kate Simpson speaking, some of you joined 20 minutes ago. I'm quite impressed. We're still waiting for people. We're expecting close to 30 people for this webinar, and there are 12 of you online now. So we're going to just wait till probably 2 or 3 minutes after official start time. People are joining as we go. For this webinar, you'll be on mute and you'll be able to hear us as the presenters. You'll notice that you've got a question option and that you can use that space to send us questions as we go, and I'll make sure they get asked. So feel free to use that now just while we're waiting for others, and to send me any questions you've got up front. There's also a function where you can put your hand up that you should see in the panel. At the head, you can see a little, I think it's the fourth column, a hand gesture, and you can do that if you like to, and just let me know if there's something you're trying to communicate, and I'll pay attention. We've got 17 people online. This is, it's exciting. We've got people booked from Queensland, in Australia, no, not Western Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and South Australia. It's a pretty good spread. Yeah, someone's just mentioned there's some feedback happening. I'm not sure where it's coming from or why. Okay, we're going to start in 1 minute. Or even less. Okay, we've got 20 people online. Let's get going. My name's Kate Simpson, and I'm an associate at Collaboration for Impact. I've been with Collaboration for Impact for a couple of months now, and I'm really excited. This is my first official activity, and I couldn't imagine a better way to start. Passionate about and building community leadership, change in complexity. My background is I've worked for over a decade in international development settings on complexity and collaboration, and more recently was the CEO for Together SA, which is an intermediary supporting collective impact initiatives in South Australia. And I've also been an associate with Opportunity Child last year. And that means I have done lots of supporting collaborations, but in the early days, particularly at Together SA, I was also convening and facilitating. So I've got that hands-on experience of, oh my God, how do we get the data going and the community participating and the right leaders in place and the money and all of those challenges that I know many of you have. So the way we're handling this webinar today is we have a presentation that Cheree and Renee from Up Mallee have worked really hard on thinking through carefully about how we're best to communicate their experience to you. We'll take about 60 minutes with that, and it's really in 2 chunks, and I'll take you through that in a second. But first I'll introduce Cheree and Renee and ask them to just give us a little bit of background about who they are. So Cheree, Jukes, who are you and how did you arrive at this moment?
Hi Kate, and hi everyone else. So I guess I began my career as a nurse and a midwife, and I spent quite a number of years travelling and working all over Australia, mostly in regional and rural areas. And when I came back to Mildura, which is where my mum's family's from, I went back to uni and studied public health, and I guess for me it was a bit like almost finding a religion. You know, I just found something I truly believed in, and
We've just lost Cheree. Let's just see. I'm sorry about that. Just checking. Cheree and Renee, we've just lost you again. Can you put in... here we go. Cheree, can you hear me now? Yeah, you're back.
Yes.
I'm really sorry. We got to the bit where you were public health.
Yeah, so studied public health, and 18 months ago had the opportunity to come out and work with the Northern Mallee Community Partnership and Up Mallee as the backbone lead. But actually just 9 weeks ago have come back into the service sector, and I've just begun working for our local council. So that's me, basically, in my career. We're raising 2 children here, so obviously the stakes are high because I want them to have the best opportunities here in regional Victoria.
Thank you very much. And Renee, who are you?
Hi, my name's Renee Ficarra, and I'm a Community Development Officer based here at Mildura Rural City Council, but my main focus of work is working on the Up Mallee initiative. I've been in the role for the last 13 years, and I've worked in community development the whole time at Mildura Rural City Council, and have been lucky to be involved in lots of different projects, including developing one of our first social indicators reports. My husband and I moved here about 15 years ago, and we didn't know anybody. He's a teacher. He got a job here, and I said, 1 year. I'll move there for 1 year. But we're here 15 years later and love it. So happy to be here, and raising our 2 small children here as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So we might move on to the next slide. So as you can see, most of you already know something about Collaboration for Impact, and I'm not going to give you the real detail around how we're going about our work. You'll know it's a network of specialists in working in complexity with communities. Collaboration for Impact is Australia's leading organisation for enabling people to tackle big, tough problems and create large-scale change through collaboration. We believe in a society where everyone is able to thrive and where communities come together to solve their own challenges and seize opportunities. And I know that everybody on this webinar shares that with us, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You'll get a copy of the presentation. So the detail that's written below in the slide, you have a chance to look at at your leisure. And there's more information, of course, around Collaboration for Impact on our website. So now I might take you through how we're going to manage this process. It's really in 2 chapters. So Cheree and Renee are going to take you through an introduction and then a reasonably deep exploration of how they've hosted community conversations with their community and reached 1,600 people in ways that were both deep and wide. It's really impressive work. And then we'll pause for some questions from you. And then the second chapter is really around the work they've done developing local leadership and the readiness of citizens to participate actively in collective impact initiatives. So these are 2 areas where we know the field, people like you and me, are often wanting to learn more, that some of this is the most inspiring part of the work, but sometimes it's also the most challenging. And there's some great practice in Up Mallee. Then what we're hoping at the end is to hear a little bit from you. And at the moment, I'm having trouble unmuting this so that we can hear everybody. So we may struggle to do that. It will best happen if you are actively using the question chat function in this webinar package. So feel free to start firing questions to me that you have for both of our presenters right now, but at any time during the webinar, because I will pepper them throughout the conversation, or we'll stop and I'll interview them at the end of our discussion, at the end of their presentation around community conversations, or at the end of their presentation around community leadership near the end. So, and then if there's interesting information or resources you want to share, you can add them to the chat and we'll make sure that they're distributed after the event or discussed during it. So over to you, Cheree and Renee. Take us through Hands Up Mallee.
So we thought that first we'd just give you some context about Mildura. So Mildura is located in the far northwest corner of Victoria, and we're in a really unique tri-state location. Only the Murray River separates us from our neighbours in New South Wales, and the South Australian border is just an hour to the west, and their capital Adelaide is only 400 kilometres from us, where our capital, Melbourne, is actually 600 kilometres to our south. And the municipality is really large. It covers approximately 10% of Victoria, a total of about 22,000 square kilometres, and we're certainly the largest LGA in Victoria. And we have a population of just under 55,000. And like everywhere, in Mildura, we have both strengths and we have challenges. We are currently the third most socio-economically disadvantaged local government area in Victoria. We have a lack of jobs growth, our population growth is slow, and unemployment is quite high. And what that means for us, as an example, one bit of data that really stands out to me is we have approximately 26% or a quarter of our population surviving on a combined household income of $650 or less. And looking at those figures, it means that in Mildura, our average household income is actually about $400 less than the Victorian average. So really high numbers of people living on not much. Our community data has Mildura ranked amongst the highest for many social indicators: family violence, youth crime, youth disengagement, child protection and out-of-home care, and the list just goes on. But on the flip side of that, many in Mildura and our surrounding towns report a really strong connection to community. We have very high participation rates in our community events. We have very strong country values and a real deep appreciation for our beautiful landscape and our productive landscape.
We thought it might also help to give some context about how we got to where we are now, as it has been quite a unique journey for us. We've had a 10-year history of strong partnerships, working with representatives from many sectors, including community, safety, health and education. We've been very data rich, and we were really lucky to work with Professor Tony Vinson, who assisted us to prepare 3 social indicators reports, the first in 2006 and another 2 in 2008 and 2012. And we set up our own framework in this time to address complex issues in the community. Over the time, we had pockets of wins, including Flow Connect, which is an organisation that aims to re-engage young people back into the education and learning pathway. We have a Headspace locally. Project ICE is a local initiative to address the issue of ICE in our community. And we've recently attracted a PASS unit, which is a step up and step down facility for those with a mental illness. And in each of these examples, everything was in place that enabled a systems change response, which is why we feel they were successful. We were then able to pull back and the work was handed over to appropriate organisations to carry on with. This was hard work that enabled the shift in the system to take place. But overall, the data did not change or shift in a positive direction for our community. There were many reflections we made on this period of time, but the biggest for us was that we were missing the voice of our community. We knew it was time for a change, and this is when we heard about collective impact. So what is Hands Up Mallee? Our community is great, but many people live with problems like family violence, drug and alcohol use, and mental health challenges. Hands Up Mallee exists to change that. We want to help our community be a place where everyone can be their best, where kids can have a great start in life, and where families are healthy, safe, and they feel like they belong. Hands Up Mallee is an initiative for long-term social change to improve the quality of people's lives and overall well-being of our community. We take a purist approach to collective impact, so we align with the 5 conditions, but we realised early on that for us, we needed to add a 6th condition, which we called community participation. We recognised that people most affected by the issues were best placed to advise on the changes that may be needed.
So our Hands Up Mallee backbone team comprises staff members from 2 local organisations, the Northern Mallee Community Partnership and Mildura Rural City Council. Right now, the backbone has a total EFT of 3.6, and that has fluctuated up to about 4 EFT at times. So as a backbone, we're quite rich in human resources, though our operational budget is extremely limited, with the majority of our expenditure on wages and not much more. So for this reason, our key priority is about ensuring we use existing resources as effectively as possible. And it means a lot of our work is building relationships, aligning effort, supporting our partners to engage in system-level analysis and planning, and ensuring community are valued partners and an absolute essential part of the conversation. Recent reflection on this way of working has highlighted that it means that often the work of Hands Up Mallee is invisible, which is something we really need to consider as we look to advance our work over the next 18 months.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes.
When you say invisible, what are you meaning? Are you meaning that just the people that are sitting at the leadership table know about it and the broader community don't, or the people in power that you're trying to influence? Where is the weakness?
Look, we quite literally took that leave your logo at the door very seriously, and we've really advocated for that way of working. But it means sometimes the Hands Up Mallee logo also gets left at the door. Mm. We do a lot of capacity building with partners, and we try and influence our partners' way of working so that it aligns with collective impact as a framework. So it will be our partners in the limelight, if you like, which is exactly how it should be, but the work is not necessarily seen by our community as being attached to Hands Up Mallee.
Yeah, so Hands Up Mallee, that's a common tension. That's a whole nother webinar, really, is the brand of the collaboration versus the brand of the partners versus the brand of the backbone or the backbone managing organisation. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
So this is the Hands Up Mallee journey map, and it can be found on our website. So the journey really started for us in June 2015 when Cheree Graham visited us. Cheree introduced about 90 participants, mainly from the service sector, to the collective impact framework and created an opportunity for those people to really immerse themselves in our local data. So in the following year, our collective impact transitional working groups began building the structure, defining broad goals, and testing this new way of working together. In June 2016, our first directions paper was launched, and this was essentially a blueprint for the next 12 months. And it certainly has kept Hands Up Mallee on track. It's incredibly valuable. Up until this point, Hands Up Mallee was still being overwhelmingly service sector driven, and we knew that for this to be any different, that we were going to have to find ways of engaging community. And this was happening at a time when the backbone was under mounting pressure to define the common agenda, but we knew that to set the agenda now without genuine, broad community engagement, we risked building our entire collective impact initiative on what could be a faulty foundation. So the 12 months work from June 2016 to setting our common agenda in June 2017 is the focus of our discussion today. Hands Up Mallee set the very aspirational goal to have conversations with true contextual experts, people who really know about social, economic and health inequity. And we set out to engage in what we call unusual suspects, so not the same voices and the same faces that you're used to seeing around the table. And we wanted to build a diverse community leaders table to guide our work. So for us, as Renee previously mentioned with that sixth condition, community consultation for us is not a once-off, it's a continuous commitment. So far, our journey can be mapped really quite beautifully using Collaboration for Impact's collaborative change cycle. There was a call for a new way of working. We sought to understand our local system, and we built a container or a structure for change. And the time that we're discussing today is probably mainly focused in those two mustard areas, building shared understanding and brokering agreement. And the red star indicates where we think we're probably at now.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
So,
community conversations, fantastic.
So we'll start now deeply moving into speaking about community conversations. A large focus for the last 18 months was our community conversations. For 2 years, we worked intensively with our service sector, setting the foundations. We knew we had to speak with community and it was a major priority, but felt we needed to start with the partnerships we had first. Collective impact is about working in a different way, and the service sector started to then ask us, where is the voice of our community? So what are community conversations? Well, for us, they provided a safe place where people in the Mallee came together to talk about their hopes, goals, concerns and priorities for our community. They were designed to bring together data, knowledge and experience from all parts of our community. Anyone could host a conversation or participate in one. Conversations could be with one or more person, or they could be formal or informal. The intent of the community conversations was for our community to have their voice heard in the development of our common agenda. And overall, we needed to develop the tools and resources to ask questions of community that could help inform our agenda. We had a time frame of 8 months. For 2 months of this time, we were in a testing phase, and for 6 months, we were in our conversation phase. And by the end, we were able to reach 1,614 voices. So how did we make this happen? In alignment with the core conditions of collective impact, being continuous communication and our condition, community participation, Up Mallee set up a comms and engagement enabling team. This is a picture of our group and it's made up of both engagement and communication specialists. The role of this group was to provide communications and engagement support and advice and feedback to the entire HUM initiative around these 2 areas. And this group assisted us in developing the tools and resources we used to deliver the conversations.
So was that photo the group responsible for it?
That is, yes. That's mostly everybody in the group that was there assisting.
So can we go back to the photo and you just tell us who these people are? Not in detail, but what sort of mix have you got? Were they hard to get on board? Yeah.
We were really lucky that this group of people were very committed and willing and passionate to get on board. So starting over on the left, that's Sam, and she's from our council's maternal child health nurse. She's the team leader and was really coming into the group from an engagement point of view. Next to her, and I'll speak about this lady next, this is Metaxia in the purple. She was an absolute standout leader through the conversation process for the entire time and really assisted us in a lot of different ways, which I will speak about a little bit later. She's from Mallee Sexual Assault and Mallee Domestic Violence Service, and then the gentleman next to her is also from there, and then we've got a TAFE representative. He is coming from a comms point of view. Then we've got a community health representative. Then we've got Cheree sitting there. Then we've got someone from a local welfare organisation, myself, and another council representative and a backbone member. So it's a spread, and there's a couple of people missing there as well. We had a couple of other communications experts also.
That's a pretty good mix, and it's pretty. I don't know if it's unusual, but sometimes collaborations have trouble getting good comms expertise in. So that's interesting and exciting. Thanks.
We probably were a little
good questions coming through. So participants should feel free to continue to direct stuff to me for when we get to the end of this session.
So now we'll go into speaking about the development and testing of the tools. So that it included a community conversations kit, a guide, infographic, animated video and an engagement plan. So I'll go through those deeply now. Starting off with our conversations kit, the first task was to develop the questions we would ask of our community. The challenge for us was to frame questions in a way that would give us what we needed from our community. A very thorough testing phase took place where we met with organisations we had good relationships with and tested the whole process. It was tested with organisation representatives and also a small group of people with lived experience, particularly through our enhanced maternal child health service. One nurse told us about how she sat on the floor with the mother and her baby and held the conversation. the mother expressing that it was the first time she'd ever been asked her thoughts on these types of issues and how good it made her feel. So we pretty much knew we were on the right track when we started to receive this type of feedback. A lot of time and thought went into the potential risk and duty of care that was required. We were really aware that when speaking to not only people with lived experience, but all people in our community about very emotive and confronting issues, that this may raise concerns and people may need support or assistance. We spoke to a number of professionals in this space and decided on adding an if you need support contact list, which we drew attention to at the beginning of every conversation. And then in our animated video, which I'll speak about later, we added a disclaimer at the beginning that some of the information might be a little bit confronting. So in the end, there were 3 ways that people could hold a conversation. One via our online survey link, one where services facilitated conversations with their clients, and the third was where us as Backbone members went in and hosted a conversation. So this is, after all the feedback we received, this is the final version of the questions. It might be a little bit hard to read, I apologise, but everything is available on our website and in the link of this webinar as well. So I'll read through the questions and why we structured them in this way, just to give you a little bit of thinking about what we went through. So the first question, we'd start off with, what's good about living in our community? What are your hopes for you, your family and our community? And what do you think are the biggest issues or concerns that your community is facing? These questions were designed to break the ice a little bit and get individuals speaking. We found that by the end of these questions, the barriers had started to come down and people started to speak more freely. We then presented some of our community's data via an infographic or animated video. We presented the data at this point because we didn't want to lead any thoughts or anyone's thoughts on what issues we should be focusing on after they'd heard the data. We then asked, what issues do you think our community should work on first to make the biggest change? What do you think is creating or causing the issues? And what do you think people in our community can do to make a difference? The kits were professionally printed, so people could take them away in hard copy, and we ended up having to keep going back to the printers constantly and printed about 2,500 copies because they were really very popular. And as another tool, we also created an easy English version with simplified questions and pictures. So what did we learn about the questions? The questions were easily understood by all demographics in our community. We only modified questions and didn't present the data when we spoke to primary school age students. The questions had a way of breaking down barriers and allowing people to open up and express their thoughts. And people were really so engaged in the questions, and it probably took about 40 minutes to an hour to complete. As a companion document, we also developed a conversation guide, and this was used to assist services to have conversations with their clients. And it was written really to suit professionals who wanted to inform themselves of the entire Hands Up Mallee initiative and how to host a hum conversation. And we adapted this from the Harwood community conversation model, and it was also inspired by the community of Burke's adaptation of the same model. Next, we developed a static infographic. A large part of the community conversation process was to educate our community on the statistics and issues our community are currently facing. This infographic was prepared to be used as a tool. It was placed in the conversation kit for people to refer to. Many versions of this tool were developed and tested, and it was an extremely time-intensive process, mainly because it was difficult to decide what statistics to keep in and what to take out, and also how to present the data graphically was a challenge. But in the end, everybody was really happy with the outcome, and it was a great tool for people to reflect on as they were speaking. And we also included it as a little perforated rip-out section of the printed kit, so that people could take it away and stick it up on their wall and refer to it at a later time if they needed to. What did we find after showing the data? Well, people were very interested in what they heard. Many were shocked and had actually no idea that this was their community's reality. They wanted to know why they didn't know about this information previously. And initially, the service sector had been concerned about the response we may receive from the community after presenting this data. But in fact, it really motivated the community to want to make a change and get involved. And we also developed an animated video. This was used as an alternative to the static infographic, with the intent that we wanted to create multiple ways to communicate the data to help suit people's different needs. Numerous drafts and trials of the animation were made and all tested with a variety of groups. We decided on a cartoon animated version with a voiceover, and the story followed the life course of the 900 babies who were born in Mildura in 2015 and what their life may look like if things stayed the same. It was actually very popular and one of the tools that we used the most, and was also a really good tool to share on social media. If you'd like to watch the animation, again, just go to our website or just Google us in YouTube. It's there as well.
It might be worth mentioning the handouts that you've loaded up as well, because we've used a couple of them so far already in your presentation, and they're really rich resources. So at the bottom of the dashboard for participants, you'll find 5 handouts, and we've already referred to 2 of them, I think. Is that right, team?
Yes, I think it is 2 so far.
So the journey one is definitely there, which is a great infographic, and I think there's another one that you've referred to too. But anyhow, continue.
Yeah, sorry, there's actually the Conversations kit is there and the infographic as well.
Great.
So now finally, the last tool we developed was an engagement plan. For us, it was essential we created a tool that would map and keep track of who we'd speak with. We needed a spread of demographics, including age, sex, cultural background and postcode within our LGA. We created a very detailed and well thought out plan in a program called Smartsheet, and we viewed this like a diary with every contact made with an organisation recorded. The plan was constantly evolving as we built more and more opportunities to expand and diversify our reach, and the document and process was key to the success of this process, we feel. One of the key strategies we wanted to use to reach people in our community with lived experience, or those living with the issues we were talking about, was to approach organisations who already had relationships with vulnerable clients. We didn't think it would work very well if we tried to go in without any form of relationship and have these types of conversations. So this was all planned for through the engagement plan. Some of the learnings from the plan: throughout the 8-month engagement period, we were tracking the demographics of who we'd spoken to through the plan and also through our SurveyMonkey link. We realised early on that we'd not heard enough from those with lived experience, men in our community, or Aboriginal people. So this then became a focus, particularly as we neared the end of the conversation. And the plan was a tool that really allowed us to keep this type of focus. I'd now like to share a story of a conversation that I attended with a group of Afghani men, which was an absolute standout for me. We worked with our council social inclusion officer, who already had a really good relationship with this group of men. We had 17 Afghani men come along, most in their 20s or 30s, and a few older gentlemen attending as well. We met down along the beautiful Murray River here on the Mildura riverfront on a warm summer's night. The group welcomed us openly into their circle, and we sat on the grass and had a fantastic conversation. We bought food and drinks for everyone to share. Some of the men spoke English, but everything was translated into their own language so that all were included at all times. They spoke about how they feel Mildura is such a beautiful place with such kind people. They also spoke to us about all the issues they and their families face in this community. Many stories were full of hope and really uplifting, while others were absolutely heartbreaking and very challenging to hear. We only sat with the men that night, but their wives and other women were meeting in another space nearby. Their children were on the play equipment and their teenagers were playing soccer in the middle. We were lucky enough to also meet with the men and youth on 2 other separate occasions to hold another conversation. At the end, we just felt so humbled to be a part of this conversation. It resonated with us all just how powerful this type of work is. And as a colleague said to me after I relayed this story back to her at work the next day, you cannot underestimate the power of a conversation, of genuinely listening and bothering to ask people.
Can I ask you a question here?
Yes.
So can we go back to that slide by the river? So this is where some of your work's lovely and interesting at the same time, and rigorous and solid, because you're not meeting in a council meeting room. Why did you choose there?
And actually, I should have said, in that picture, over to the left was exactly where we sat. So we didn't take any pictures of the consultation, but this was the next best thing. It was very important to us to always meet in a location that was suitable to the group we were meeting with. So I would pretty much say we never held any community conversations in a council building or any type of formal building. We mostly, with community, went to their meeting space. So, for example, we met with the Neighbourhood Watch and we went out to their meeting at night time. Also, after hours is a key to making this happen. We'd often try to tag onto other meetings that they were already holding. So there might be groups that already had a meeting every month, and we'd ask if we could just come in at the end and hold a conversation. So this was a place that our social inclusion officer that I'd mentioned had suggested, a really neutral, comfortable place where they actually meet they were meeting there every week, I think, anyway, for dinner. And so we asked if that would be okay for us to come in. And honestly, it was just an absolute standout with how it all unfolded.
And why did you meet with the men alone?
That was suggested to us that would be the most comfortable thing for people to do. Again, we spoke with our social inclusion officer and also our local, they're called Up Mallee Ethnic Communities Council. We spoke with them a lot to arrange all of our cold groups, and they really advised us on what was best. So we got some background to the group and just what they'd feel comfortable with. And this was suggested to us that we meet with the men, and then we met with the women after one of their cooking groups at SMEC, and then we met with the youth after at one of their youth groups in the evening.
So which one, of all the conversations you had, which one took you most out of your normal way of doing things?
Well, possibly this one, because we were in a place with no technology. So because usually we'd go to a place that had a projector and we could show our video. This one was also a little more challenging because most people, if they spoke a little bit of English, so they may have spoken a little bit of English, but certainly couldn't read English. So our booklets probably weren't overly useful. It was also difficult to relay the indicators and the data. So that was more done. We were just very much in a conversational way, speaking that to the interpreter, and they were then relaying that. But despite all those challenges, it was probably, to me, it really stands out as the best because it was very casual and comfortable, but a lot of barriers were broken down and some really profound information was received from the group.
Kate, just building on that, the other conversations that challenged us as a backbone were with primary school students. So it was quite contentious. What was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate, and what would be a safe way to hold those conversations. So they were quite challenging as well.
Yep. That's not an unusual challenge in lots of initiatives, because quite a few collective impact initiatives around the country are child focused, and it's easy for us, or more easy for us, to host conversations with adults. The really basing some of the work or lots of the work on children's voices is challenging, and again sometimes really rewarding too. How did you do that?
I think Renee's already mentioned that when we had conversations with primary school age children, we didn't actually present the infographic. We just very much focused on their own views and thoughts, as opposed to leading them anywhere or providing any, data. The profound thing that we found when reading and scribing those conversations is that children as young as 8, 9 and 10 have very good insight into what's going on in their communities and some brilliant suggestions for what would make a really positive difference in their lives.
Do you have an example of that? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, look, down the highway, just over an hour, is a small town called Oyen. And we went and spoke to Oyen's primary school students, and they talked a lot about their pride in community, that a real fear that their classes are getting smaller, they're being forced to amalgamate football clubs and netball clubs, which is a really big thing for them because pride and connection through sporting clubs is really vital, and all of a sudden you're having to amalgamate with your arch rival. And these things were genuinely upsetting these young people. They knew that their library was closing. They knew that there was something else coming, but they were really fearful of that. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you. There's a question that's come through from Eula that I might ask now, because I think it connects to what you've been talking about in terms of the diversity of people you've been speaking to. So Eula was asking about the rationale behind the power of unusual suspects and why you wanted to reach out to people that were beyond the usual suspects.
I can't remember what article it was written in, but something we discussed as a backbone was just how important it was to hear from people who are going to be the most difficult to reach. We also came, I guess there was some friction. It took us a long time to build rapport with some of our Aboriginal elders and different groups as well. One backbone member who really pursued that, and it really took her the full 6 months of continuing to go back and see what was and wasn't appropriate, and because timing is everything. One of the members in that Aboriginal elders group actually said that sometimes they feel like rent-a-mob. You know, there's a consultation piece and they get rolled out, and then the consultation finishes and they get rolled back in again. So we were learning a lot about groups that feel like they're over-consulted but not necessarily linked to the actions that come from that consultation and what that looks like. As well as people like that young mother on the lounge room floor who said to that nurse, "No one has actually ever asked my opinion ever before."
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, thank you for indulging me with those questions.
Okay, so of course we came up against many challenges along the way. One of our largest challenges was that services were willing to have the conversations with their clients, but they weren't actually having time. They weren't being able to find the time to actually have them along with their everyday business, especially when working with clients in crisis. This was a great concern for HUM because, as I mentioned, working through services and their existing relationships was how we were planning to reach those with lived experience. Through one of our HUM partners, which was actually Metaxia, who I showed you before, and one of our standout leaders in the process, she approached us with the idea of taking on 14 TAFE students for their placement to assist us in the process. Initially, as a backburn, we were pretty concerned because we were not sure if we could give away any more valuable time, which at that point we didn't have because we were so busy scheduling and hosting conversations. But we decided to go ahead with the placements as we were confident the time we put into the students would result in so many more conversations being achieved. And they were with us for 2 months. Students were placed across 9 local services who took on the role of managing the students and their course needs, but they had a key focus of hosting conversations with us. To support the students, the backbone put in place a range of key check-in points and supports for them as well. Overall, the students made an absolutely huge impact to the outcome of our conversations. You can see the graph which depicts the conversations we were having each week and the difference in volume of conversations we were able to have with the students indicated by the pink line where there's this huge spike. So we were so happy that we decided to go ahead with that.
So just as the communication and engagement enabling team began celebrating successfully reaching so many community members, the second enabling team, our research, evaluation and measurement team, were really just getting to work. This was led by the Backbone, and they were tasked with analysing this huge body of qualitative data. And the details of how we did this is all available on our website in the methodology paper. I cannot stress enough, do not underestimate the thought, testing, refining, more thought, more testing, more refining, and time that this work is going to take. In brief, we used a methodology called the framework method. Every single scribe note from our community conversations was entered into SurveyMonkey. This raw qualitative data was then exported into the project management software we use called Smartsheets. We developed a coding matrix that included core concepts, themes, and sub-themes so that every single response was then coded by the Backbone using this matrix. And to ensure validity, 2 Backbone staff members then cross-checked every single one of those words again. Every single word coded and then recoded. The results were presented to our community leaders in both quantitative graphs and qualitative stories that we called deep dives, where we explored more deeply what the community were actually saying around our most frequent themes. And all of this is available to you.
So now on the screen, I really don't expect you to read that because there's very small writing, but again, this is included in one of the links in the webinar or one of the uploaded documents, and it's a summary of our overall conversation outputs. So in the end, we were able to speak to 1,614 people. They ranged in demographics including sex, cultural background and age, and after 8 months, we were extremely happy with the outcome. Of particular interest, Indigenous people represent 4% of our community, and out of the 1,600 people we spoke to, 6% were Indigenous. So for us, that was a really terrific response. And I'd spoken about this before, but we had an overwhelming response from different cultural groups within our community. And we feel this was achieved through existing relationships we've had and working with local organisations.
Fantastic.
Now we'll move on to key learnings from the conversations. So throughout the process, we had many learnings, but we thought we'd share just some of our key findings in the hope that they could help others and those listening. For more details, it can be found in the Community Conversations evaluation paper, which is on our website, and this report details the entire conversation from start to end. So everything we've spoken about today in a lot more detail if anyone wanted that. So what was fed back to us? A very unintentional positive impact that was reported often was that it allowed for the worker who was hosting a conversation with their client to discuss things they'd sometimes never spoken about before in their regular contact. And it allowed the worker to better understand their client's needs and resulted in a very positive outcome for both. It was also evident when hosting conversations that people who had often not had a voice in our community now felt as though they had one. And for us and for them, it was a really empowering experience. And what did we learn from the conversations generally? Constantly keep asking, are we engaging with everyone who has a stake in these issues? If not, change your approach. Encourage teams to be okay with uncertainty. As a Backbone, we faced a lot of uncertainty through this period, but in the end, it was okay. Keep thinking about things from the audience point of view at all times. All the information we received was treated with the utmost respect and each voice was so valued. This was expressed when holding the conversations through our words and through our actions. So we would advise to be so humble and sincere in your approach. We're there to listen and to learn. We had standout individuals in the partnership who took on leadership roles in advocating for conversations, and we were so thankful for them. That's not something you can go out and find. That just came to us. The CEO of our local community health service set the public an ambitious task of saying that their organisation would consult with 200 people through this process, and they actually did it, which was so fantastic. We'd often talk as a backbone that we were so overwhelmed by the positive responses we received when asking people to take part. Almost every organisation and person approached was happy to be involved. And we'd recommend to take the time to test with diverse stakeholders. It makes for much better outcomes and helps to iron out any little creases. And overall, we learnt that our community is passionate, compassionate and motivated to create change, and it was a privilege to be a part of.
Okay, thank you both. That was fantastic around what is a really rich process of hosting community conversations. And you've shared some really strong messages around the time it takes. You've shown that when you hit a roadblock around the ability of service providers who might be sitting at the leadership table but struggling to follow through in terms of interrupting day-to-day business to host conversations, you've come up with a creative solution that's quite different. And that you've also managed to host conversations in really diverse settings. So there's been some great questions coming through from people, and I realised that the one I was saying was from Eula. It wasn't from Eula, it was from Darren, so apologies for both. But I might run through with you some of the questions we've got, and we've got 6 or 7 for the next 10 minutes, just to give you a sense of how to manage your time. The question that came from Eula was early on around the leadership holding this process, and are members of that team volunteers or paid?
The community leaders table?
Yeah, you had a photo up of the leaders around this project.
Yeah. All of those people they are all in paid positions, those people sitting around that communication engagement group table.
Yep.
Yeah.
And whereas the TAFE students and some of the people hosting conversations were or weren't in paid roles? Yeah.
Weren't. So a combination of both.
And one thing I wasn't sure if you guys had mentioned while I was sorting out a couple of technical things, did you explain who's in the backbone of Hands Up Mallee?
We mentioned there's 3.6 EFT, but look, Renee works part-time, and the other part of that EFT is her colleague Tony, who's currently on maternity leave but was with us during this time period. So the two of them together at council have a very long history of engagement roles, community engagement. So that's the skill set they brought, and I guess they fell into the role of facilitating the communication engagement group because of that skill set. Another council staff member, Fiona Merlin, has a really keen interest in data, and the research, evaluation and measurement team, as a consequence, is the group that she facilitates. And again, that research, evaluation, measurement team is a combination of people from all different organisations and the community. When I came into the role as the Executive Officer of Northern Mallee Community Partnership, the team were able to really clearly articulate if there was an opportunity to recruit, what skill sets we needed. So keeping in mind when we developed all of this, we really relied heavily on the communication enabling team, but we thought it would be worthwhile, if the EFT became available, to employ someone in a paid position with a specific comms background. So we've done that since then. We've actually employed someone 0.5, and it has just relieved so much pressure off the backbone. None of us are social media heroes in any sense, and we were working incredibly hard to do our best, but it's so much easier now we've got someone with that specialist knowledge.
And has that played an important role in engagement versus marketing?
Absolutely. So with Lila's assistance, she now has a style guide that has seen us boost our Facebook following. Every bit of Hands Up Mallee material that comes out has her expert eye go over it, and we're seeing much bigger reach.
Great. So there's a few questions around data, and one of the questions around data was right at the beginning from Darren Hill around you speaking about Mildura being data rich, and the questions around what made it data rich. Was it easy to use data in a state to inform decision making? Darren says he sees a lot of communities who are swimming in data but can't make sense of it and struggle to derive patterns or insights and inform decision making. Very keen to hear what made yours rich and how you made sense of it.
I think that Darren's story is closely aligned with ours. We are data rich and analysis poor. So, and we'll go into that a little bit with our community leaders table, but we are drowning in data here. We're not all measuring the same way. We're not all talking about it in the same way. And often we're not sharing it as well as we could, but we are drowning in data here. But someone needs to make sense of it, which is exactly right.
So how did you do that? You produced an infographic. Another question coming from Leanna Harding relates to this too, is, where did the data come from? Was it publicly available? How did you move it into huge amounts of data into an infographic you could use for the purpose of community conversation?
As Renee mentioned earlier, we have worked on our indicators for a long time, and there's a number of reports that have been published. So we were able to draw from that. Our municipal public health and wellbeing plan, which is I'm not sure what happens in other states, but in Victoria, every local government is required to submit a public health and wellbeing plan. Our council has a long history of informing those plans with data, and so we invest a lot of money and time pulling these reports together, and they draw from every type of data. I think there's about 13 data sources that we reliably draw from. That's how we do it, and the council brings it together for us.
Okay, so when you say analysis, you're talking more generally about how the conversation takes place in the region rather than how it's taking place here and now in Up Mallee, because it sounds like there's some good analytical skills happening with people you've got access to.
Yeah, and so an example of that is there's some data related to Mildura that shows that we're not reaching the number of young people who, in line with the state average of those who are going off to tertiary studies after high school. But when we look closer at that story, our young people are almost forced financially to take a gap year. And when we look at the young people who go on to tertiary study at the end of the gap year, we actually come back up to the state average almost. So because of our rural isolation and our regional isolation and the cost involved in relocating often for university, young people are forced to take a gap year, they take it, but then they do go off to complete studies. But when you look at all the data about Mildura, it shows that we have about half of our young people heading off to uni, which is actually not quite true.
Okay. And there's a couple more. David Lilly asked about how you manage such a large volume of qualitative data, and I think you answered that after the question came in. So I'm going to invite anyone who's sent a question who's not feeling it's adequately dealt with to keep typing. But I'm curious, just around smart sheets and how you use them, is that available in any of the documents you're sharing?
The methodology paper really steps it out like you would expect a methodology paper to do. We thought and we put a plan in place, and when we went to enact the plan, we realised the plan was flawed, so we had to go back and do it again, and it took us a long time. We had hoped that there was actually going to be some other computer software that was going to take care of analysing that qualitative data and coding it for us. Our thinking was flawed, and we actually ended up having to do it manually. And because we had made a commitment to the community that we were going to set the common agenda in June 2017, we just did it manually over many, many, many hours.
Very, very deep commitment. Well done. Catherine Hyde asked about the voices of Aboriginal and CALD community members, and I think you've spoken to that. And Jess Orr was wondering about whether you heard different things from from 3 different Afghan community groups you spoke to, men, women and young people. And I'm going to ask you to keep that response really short because there's more questions coming in and we do need to move to the piece around building community leadership because you've got a lot of interesting stuff to say on that too.
I will keep it short because I don't have that information with me now. I could, if you'd like a bit more information, that I can go back into the conversation results and look through that, but nothing's really standing out to me that I can probably communicate now. Sorry.
And Leanna Harding also asks about formal consent. How did you manage consent?
Consent to have the conversation?
Participating in the conversations and the use of their information. Did you get them to sign consent forms or?
No, we didn't get them to sign a consent form, but we had the disclaimer on the back that said that this information will be used for this purpose, and we alerted them to the disclaimer before they started the conversation.
And I'm assuming you wouldn't be sharing individualised information.
No.
Identified.
And that was stated in the disclaimer that only a very small number of people would see that raw data. And we came unstuck with that a couple of times. We were challenged by it where we wanted to use the data in different ways, but we actually would have broken our commitment and we simply couldn't do it.
Great. Thank you. And finally, the last question for this part of the session is how you shared back to community what you'd heard.
Yeah, great. So when we had the conversations, we gathered email addresses and we always had a contact person that we'd organised or arranged the session with. So at the end, we were able to send back what we had collated to them via email mainly.
Great. So we're now moving on to the discussion around how you built the capacity of local citizens to participate and for the leadership group that was already established to welcome them in. And just to encourage participants to keep feeding questions in, it's really fabulous. And Darren's also just sent a link to a resource that I'll share with you at the end. And really welcoming anything that participants have got to share on these subjects as well. And we'll keep this all coming as part of the feedback you get from this event. So over to you guys again.
So can I just start by saying don't try and read all the information on this slide. I just wanted to show you this. It's a template that we use that captures a really large volume of work, and this particular one shows the community leaders table during the time period that we're talking about. The templates, it's just a really clear, concise way of showing the original intent, some of the learnings along the way, success factors, and you can have those down the bottom, the blue bits are actually linked to the artifacts of that work. So again, I know we keep saying this, but it is on the website. So moving into the community leaders table, can I just say that this is actually our 3rd iteration, and it almost could have an entire webinar on its own, and very happy to talk to anyone who's struggling with how this is going to work in their own community. But for the purpose of today, I'm not going to worry about too much what went wrong, basically the first 2 times. I'm just going to focus on what went right this time. So in late 2016, we put the call out for community members with both formal and informal networks to form the community leaders table. And we've said it before, we were deliberately setting out to find unusual suspects. We hoped that this group of people would be the sense makers of the data and the stories, like we've been talking about, that they would be our direction setters and our conduit in and out of community, regularly and consistently. So the group formed at a time of real urgency. As I've mentioned, June 2017 would mark the 2-year point in our collective impact initiative, and we had made a commitment to deliver a common agenda. The partnership were calling for clarity of purpose and direction, and we just drew a line in the sand and said, righto, this is when it's going to happen. So in the 3 months leading up to June, we brought a group of approximately 40 community members along a journey of trust building and capacity building, getting them ready for the June 2017 event where we would define the common agenda. We had CEOs, we had government department managers, educators, health professionals, mums, dads. We had people from diverse cultures, ages, life experiences, and every other type of personal attribute you can think of. Perhaps most importantly, we know that of those 40 people, we had the real contextual experts. We had people who intimately knew our community and the experience of living with inequity. We asked this group what it would take for them to be ready by June 2017, and they told us from the outset that they wanted to be able to trust each other, that no individual was to be more important or more valuable than another. They did want to know the process credible, but they didn't want to go too deep into the theory. They wanted to know about the data, but they wanted to understand the stories behind the data as well. And this group of people, they set the agenda, they controlled the meeting logistics, and to tell you the truth, these meetings have absolutely changed my expectations about what a truly valuable and worthwhile meeting looks and feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So over the 3 months, we used a really simple 3-step recipe. First, we built a shared commitment to each other and in uncovering our common agenda. This was about relationship building. It was about creating a safe environment for people to learn and to seek to understand the views of others. The second component was about building a shared understanding of our local context. And we did this by asking 2 leading questions over and over again. What serves our community well and what does not serve our community well? So this is where we looked at the data, we listened to the stories of others, we considered parts of the system that could be or should be interrupted or disrupted. We also purposely held each other in a learning space, and we called each other out when we jumped to assumptions and we jumped to solutions and programmatic responses, which we did from time to time. And with that building trust, we were able to say, hang on a minute, we're not there yet, and bring the conversation back to where it needed to be. And lastly, we took...
How you actually did that, because that's a really common challenge.
Yeah, look, the group actually did it themselves. So the first meeting really was the question to the group, what do you need? What do you need to learn? What do you need from each other? What do you need from us? And they told us very clearly in the beginning that they wanted to hold each other to account, and they did. It was beautiful.
And can I double check something, because I may have lost concentration, which would be a terrible thing for a host to do. But did you talk about selection, like how you chose these people?
Look, we had this conversation time and again. What we decided to do was just open the door wide, but we kept an eye on the balance of people in the room. And people did that themselves. And at times where the balance was a bit off in some meetings, we even had that community leaders table meeting saying, oh, the tone was a bit different tonight, wasn't it? You know, we didn't have these people here, or this person wasn't here, and she normally reminds us about this. So they really did control that themselves. And we were, at one stage, we actually nearly tipped it too far. We thought it would be difficult to get our contextual experts in the room. In fact, it was the other way, and we had to work really hard to get particularly people with formal authority in the room.
Yeah, okay, that's another common problem. Thank you.
So we plan to actually show a 90-second video here, but the technology is not going to work today. But the PowerPoint pack, when you get it, you'll be able to do that. This video shows the community leaders in action. It's shot from a much longer video where we had a young man called Josh come and speak to the group. And Josh, he really wanted to share his story. His story includes themes of family breakdown, abandonment, drug use, the influence of parenting and role models, connection to community through sport, and what it takes to move towards a different future. So we heard Josh's story, and then we reminded the group this is an individual story. We need to think this through from a community-wide perspective. And then we got into some really deep conversations about what serves our community well and what was not serving our community well. So all of this work culminated in the June 2017 Common Agenda Setting event. On this day, those 40 people from our community leaders table were joined by our service sector leaders, most of whom had been involved in the previous 2 years' development of Up Mallee. So they did come in with some good knowledge. This group were presented the results of the community conversations, and in that photo you can see slightly in the background up the posters on the back are showing the qualitative and quantitative information from the community conversations. So the day was facilitated by Cheree, and Cheree led us through a series of activities and conversations where by the end of the day we were going to define the common agenda. So I observed something quite remarkable on that day that I do want to share. The day began really high energy, keeping in mind that those 40 community leaders had been meeting fortnightly for the past 3 months, and they had a really strong rapport and strong relationships, and they were really comfortable as a group and confident. Some of the executives and senior managers from the service sector, who may have traditionally held the balance of power, didn't seem to. So as a backbone, we were thinking, brilliant. This 3 months investment in capacity building is really paying off. And as the day progressed, we saw some execs come and go. They were taking phone calls, they excused themselves intermittently. Not our 40 community leaders table members. This was the absolute most important thing that they were doing right here and right now. So this is where we got to at the end of the day, and we knew our common agenda was on this wall. But we needed to clarify further, we needed to prioritise, and we had some tough decisions to make about what we were going to do, but tougher still, what we weren't going to do. And this is where something really interesting happened. Our community leaders, many of them began to look tired, and they got really quiet. And many of our usual suspects, those with formal positions of authority, they really started to find their voice, and they became the loudest in the room. So in an effort to push forward, it's the end of the day, it's been a pretty long, hard slog, Cheree and I started to ask them some yes-no questions, some agree-disagree questions, where participants were asked to either stand if they agreed or remain seated if they disagreed. And I started to see our community leaders faltering. Their bottoms were literally hovering on seats as they struggled to hold the line on what they truly believed or to follow the growing strength and conviction of other participants in the group. And seeing this and sensing something that I didn't really understand at the time, I felt a real need to urge the community leaders, if you do not agree, if this is not what you truly believe, do not stand. As a backbone, we were feeling a bit flat. We believed that by the end of this day, we would have our common agenda. But I look back at that moment with pride, seeing our community leaders, these people who had committed their personal time and energy to coming along on the journey with us so that they would be the best place to define our common agenda, remain seated. They were really united in their determination not to be railroaded into an outcome that they simply didn't agree with. They felt a real commitment to truly value the voice of community coming through the community conversations, and as a backbone, we needed to just respect where we got to that day. So we needed to actually reconvene the community leaders table another 2 times after the event before we got to our common agenda. So this is it in a nutshell. So our vision is of a connected community where families matter and children thrive. Our focus is broad, and for this reason, we've broken it into 4 more workable areas: the first 1,000 days, the best start to life, young people matter, and tread your own path. And we're using 2 key shared approaches that came across really strongly in those community conversations. That's people supporting people and strengthening families. And our scope is within the prevention and early intervention space. And in the next phase, we're going to define the specific outcomes we're seeking and how we're going to measure success. And we're going to work sequentially at this point. So we're going to focus our efforts and resources in the first 1,000 days, but we're hoping to move really swiftly into the other focus areas. And our community leaders table, they're continuing to meet monthly, though the focus of their role, I guess, has changed now that the common agenda is set. So the community leaders table will provide our overall direction to Hands Up Mallee. They are our sense makers, they're community connectors, and they're our community champions. And they really keep us grounded in the heart of community and remind us every day who we actually work for and what is most important to our community.
So after the common agenda was set, the backbone needed to take some time to reconnect together as a group and plan for the next phase of work, which took some time. Our directions paper was released in January this year, and the paper communicates a broad, high-level plan that maps out the work of Hands Up Mallee for the next 18 months. It presents the common agenda to this point and provides us a set of recommended next moves to launch this next phase of work. The next moves outlined in the paper are a resource to open discussions with an even wider group of people in our community, where we'll start the community conversation process all over again with our common agenda lens. We'll move quickly to implement these actions. As Cheree said before, we've started to work on our first focus area, which is the first 1,000 days, and we've begun our systems mapping with all key players from the service system involved in the first 1,000 days. And we have a first 1,000 days event planned for April, where we'll analyse the system, find key leverage points, and create a plan for action.
So I guess just in summary, we knew that to stay true to collective impact, if we did not genuinely engage, it was simply just going to be more business as usual. And we thought that it would be really hard to reach people, and I think that's why it took us 2 years to get to this point maybe, that people would be reluctant to speak to us. But in actual fact, that's the complete opposite of what happened. Our community is known for doing things its own way. By working differently, we think that we absolutely will achieve great change by looking through at the system as a whole. And I know that our engagement strategy might not suit yours, but learning from others was absolutely priceless to us. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and any little bit of insight into practically how we could achieve this was just lapped up by our backbone team. And there's absolutely no way in this hour and a half together that we can cover everything. But we have made the conscientious decision that all of our work is freely available. So look at the website, and if you're not finding what you're looking for, pick up the phone and just call us, because we'd love to talk to you about it. That's it.
Fantastic. I'm going to do the round of applause on behalf of the muted audience, because what happens when I try to unmute people is I mute the presenters, which really is the point. That was fantastic. So encouraging people participating to send through questions through the chat space. Sorry, you're getting feedback again. So I've got a question or two. You describe a process of building community members' readiness to participate in leading decision-making around the common agenda, and you took time to do it. What were the 3 or 4 things that you did that 3 months on that you're a bit surprised that you actually did with that community? What sorts of tools and techniques did you use to prepare people for it?
Look, again, a bit of a disclaimer. We backed ourselves into a bit of a corner because we had made a promise and now we had to deliver, basically. We didn't have time to spare, so we actually consulted with Cheree frequently over that 3 months to bounce ideas off her and for her to share her wisdom on what other communities were doing. So that was absolutely invaluable. Look,
Cheree, in that you were meeting like every fortnight and kind of biting off a piece of learning with each meeting.
Yeah. So we really worked through those 3 steps. So we were building those relationships. We were finding ways to engage people in learning about what was going on in the community. What we didn't want was boring meetings that people dragged their feet to. So we really worked hard to create real buzz. And the meetings were so well attended. And as much as, to be honest, I felt sick every Thursday that meeting would happen because I felt a real sense of responsibility and the weight of expectation. That group really, when you get those people in that room and you give them space, they will make magic on their own. They honestly will. And that's something I didn't understand prior to going through this process, to just create an environment and the people within it will do what is right and needs to be done.
Someone just asked a really simple and important question that I answer, which is, who's Cheree? So Cheree Graham is the founder of Collaboration for Impact and one of the directors along with Liz Skelton. So Cheree's played a real leadership role nationally around raising awareness of collective impact as an approach that's useful for dealing with social complexity, and has been playing that role as a national leader for about the last 4 or 5 years. It's not a terrible thing that not everybody knows her, but it's worth acknowledging the role that she's played. And it's the sort of thing that Collaboration for Impact would hope to be able to offer many different initiatives, support when they're in these moments of that sick feeling of, what do I do? We are only 1 step ahead of our communities and we're working really hard to try and get 2 steps ahead. So there are quite a few questions coming through, and one of them I think's from Jeanette Lowe's, a really important and interesting one. Were service management invited or expected to be part of the community's leadership group, or were you thinking they would be separate groups? And I was wanting to ask you that a similar question, because many initiatives spend quite a lot of time working out how to host quite a diverse table of leaders that have both service leaders, government, political leaders and citizens all sitting around the table. Why did you approach this in this way?
So it's part of the way our collective impact initiative is structured. So the majority of the funds that support our work comes through the Northern Mallee Community Partnership. They have an executive governance group. Therefore, they are in a formal position of authority. And I guess in June 2015, we decided to use that as the foundation. Now, whether the Northern Mallee Community Partnership is the right foundation for us as Up Mallee grows, that's a big question mark, to tell you the truth. It is also a very important question because it's one of the reasons the previous 2 attempts faltered. So we have the Northern Mallee Community Partnership Executive Governance Group who hold that position of authority, yet we're trying to build a community leaders table who also hold a position of authority. And the relationship between those 2 groups has been tricky for us to negotiate. What we did in this case is we asked executives who has got the time and the ability to commit to attending the community leaders table, and we had 2 CEOs put their hand up To tell you the truth, they did their best. Their attendance was not as good as everyone else's probably, but they certainly did their best. And other executives, we strongly encourage them to come along to at least one, but more, just to sit in that room. All the feedback we got from those execs when they did come to a meeting was, wow, I really enjoyed it. You know, keep in mind this is happening after hours on a Thursday evening. I wasn't expecting that, basically. And they were really positive about it.
Thank you. Jeanette Lowe's asked, and we've got 5 minutes to go, and there's a couple more questions after this. I can see the community leaders group is hugely important to your next phase of implementation too. How are you thinking other formal role leaders, either councillors, CEOs, are going to join that leadership role?
So, look, we're constantly asking ourselves these questions, I guess. We've still got the Northern Mallee Community Partnership Executive Governance Group, and HUM still fits within their portfolio. So they really are driving the initiative. I was originally going to talk about this, but took it out. But our partnership at times has been a bit like a family Christmas. You know, you've got your energetic organisers, you've got your generous gift givers, you've got your Scrooges, and we've got a couple of uncles sleeping on the couch too. So that's the reality of what our partnership looks like. But we just keep saying we'll go where the energy is. That's where we'll go, and eventually it's just going to be a tidal wave and people are going to get swept along with it, whether they like it or loathe it.
Okay, and just a short question. Who funds Hands Up Mallee?
Look, at the moment, financial resourcing mostly is with the Northern Mallee Community Care Partnership. That's one of 28 primary care partnerships across the state funded by Department of Health and Human Services. That's where the majority comes from. Mildura Rural City Council, actually I'm thinking about probably fund a similar amount in different ways, I guess. And we're seeing other partners move towards more substantial financial contributions. Great.
Thank you. We are moments away from ending this webinar, and I'm actually going to allow a couple of people, before we tell you where to get more information, I'm just going to give you a bit of feedback from people participating because they're going to do my job for me. A thank you, not a question. This is from Rebecca If. I think I'm pronouncing that right. A thank you, not a question, Cheree and Renee. Thank you for a really generous and open presentation and for all the detail on consultation successes, the careful management of collected data and community leaders especially. So great to have the importance of comms highlighted and your approaches. Congratulations and all the best. Kate, thank you for your warm and inclusive hosting. And thank you, Rebecca, for the feedback. And from Liana, amazing in capital letters, 4 exclamation marks, so helpful, 1 exclamation mark. Thank you, 4 exclamation marks. Thank you, participants. It's been really lovely hosting a bunch of people who we can't actually speak to but are sending through really great questions. So what next? Cheree and Renee, if people are wanting more information, you've already said you've put it together in a pack that reflects the diligence with which you've prepared for this webinar, and that looks like the link. What will people find there?
So this takes you to our Hands Up Mallee newly launched website, and we've created a little extra tab under the events link. There's a Collaboration for Impact webinar link that you can go through to. All the resources that we've spoken about are there today, and they're actually in order of how they were presented in the presentation, if that makes any help to anyone, because we thought there's quite a few links there. The only link that I was just made a note of as we were speaking that isn't there at the moment is the methodology paper. I will get onto our comms person to pop that on there, but you would be able to find it on the website if you wanted to search, but I'll just try and get it on there.
Fantastic. So that's a one-stop pack. And this webinar and the recording will be made available to you as a follow-up from Collaboration for Impact. And if you could flip to the next slide. Thank you. Collaboration for Impact this is part of the 2018 learning program, and it takes all sorts of exciting forms. So webinars, coaching, face-to-face training and participatory learning opportunities, and of course the annual conference. This year the annual conference is really looking to convene the field. So when you look at who's involved in organising it, it's a diverse group of individuals alongside allies like the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, Michelle Lucas at CMM, and the people at Together SA. And I think Opportunity Child are also contributing. So it's a really rich learning program for this year. We are very grateful for those of you that participated here and now, and we hope to continue our relationship with you. And a big round of applause and special heartfelt thank you for Cheree and Renee for really approaching this with the head, heart and souls that you bring to this work. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah. Okay, so time to sign off. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, Cheree and Renee.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Kate. Bye.